Hello and welcome to episode 4, Bikes and Birds. And in this episode, we're going to show you all of our fabulous film motorcycles, starting with Red Player 1, otherwise known as the Akira mobility scooter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and grab Master Maker and I'm going to ask him all the questions that we get asked when we take these machines out to conventions. So see you in a minute. Oh, hi, Master Maker. I'm wondering if I could ask you some questions about the bike. Is that okay? Yeah. Right, what I want to ask you is all the questions people normally ask, like, how fast does it go? How long did it take to make? Is it road legal? What's it feel like when you're riding it? And what do all those screens do? What sort of noise does it... Oh, okay, I'll start with one. How fast does it go?
Yeah, really good question. How fast does it go? We're asked that one a lot. It does around about 20-25 miles an hour on the main electric motor, which is driven via a chain drive to the back wheel. And that's in motorcycle mode. It's complicated because it also does 4 miles an hour. Now it does 4 miles an hour. When the little wheels that you can just about see poking down to the sides hit the ground, the computer takes over and it limits it to a whopping 4 miles an hour, which is what is required to make it road legal as a mobility scooter. So yeah, really good question. What was your next question?
How does it work?
Right, as I mentioned, it works on a 450 watt electric motor. Now I'm going to take the panels off. So the best bet is to come over and have a look, and then you can see exactly how it works. So you can see here, all these panels come out off the seat, and then we can see how it works. So inside there we have the big electric motor, and what this electric motor does, it's driven there via a chain onto the back wheel, and there's a second little gear in there which is a pulley gear. It's like a tensioner. That's provided, or power is provided to this motor via the battery bank, which is down here. Now we use 3 batteries, so we've got 36 volts that runs through the motor. That goes into the computer, which is kind of tucked away underneath, which you can't see. And then you've got your twist grip here. So obviously you pull back on the twist grip, it goes forwards, or power is applied to the motor. Now, you can see down here, there's another switch. Now this is a reverse gear switch. So in one position, it takes you forwards, switch to the other position, and it goes backwards. And again, you just apply the throttle and away you go, really. So that is how it goes.
Is it road legal?
Yeah. As an electric motorcycle, no, unfortunately not in this country. As a mobility scooter, so I'll give you a little demo here of the electronic system. So you can see now, little wheels here going up. I flick the switches. So we're going to go into motorcycle mode now. And as you can see, the bike balances just like any motorcycle. Obviously I can't take my feet up, because if I took my feet up, I'm going to fall over. So let me just pop the side stand down. Oh, she's still recalculating my route. There we go. Now again, I'm going to drop it into mobility scooter mode. In fact, I'm going to get off, and then you can see it doing its kind of little party trick. Yes, it is completely legal. The world's first, in fact, Akira mobility scooter. The computer, as I said, limits it to 4 miles an hour. It has all the things that it needs to conform to the law in this country to make it a road legal mobility scooter. The only problem is I can't ride it because I have no need to ride a mobility scooter. But if you had a need to ride a mobility scooter, you could drive this through a shopping centre if you wanted to.
What are all those screens for?
Bring the camera around and have a look, and then if you can see, we'll power it all up. Right, so the screens and all the gadgets, they're really hard to see in the sunlight, but what's showing now, we've got a rear view camera, so you can kind of see what's behind you on the screen. So this is a rear view monitor which is on all the time. This can be switched. So if we switch this one now, then we move to sat nav, and then we can move to a different kind of radio mode. We can then move to a music mode with our sound system on there. And then we've got more switches down here. So these switches turn on the different lights and flashing things. Obviously we've got indicators that flash. Is there anything I would change on this bike? Yeah, there was one major problem. Now the problem is this is a comic book motorcycle. It's 9.5 feet long. It's nearly 3 feet wide. The problem with it is, as a motorcycle, it's great. Electric motorcycle, you turn the handlebars and it goes around the corners and it leans, and it's absolutely brilliant. As a mobility scooter, not so good, because the problem is, as a mobility scooter, when you've got the extra wheels on the ground, when you turn the handlebars, you can't lean. And because you can't lean, you don't get the same turning angle, the same steering angle. So, you know, I mentioned going into a shopping centre. The only negative with driving it through a shopping centre is it might take you about 87 turns to get around corners, which might slow you down a bit. But as a motorcycle, it's brilliant. It's really, really good. What was the problem with the steering? Well, the issue is to do with geometry and the fact that we're combining two things together. This is both an electric motorcycle and it's a mobility scooter. And as a mobility scooter, it needs to have a very sharp turning angle, almost 90 degrees on the front wheel if you think about it. But as a motorcycle, it doesn't need that kind of steering angle, because if you turn a front wheel on a motorcycle to 90 degrees and go around a corner, you're going to fall off. When you lean on a motorcycle, that compensates for you for the steering. Problem with this one is it's both. So as an electric motorcycle, when you ride it, the steering is adequate, it's perfect. But as a mobility scooter, we can't get enough lock on the front wheel to go around corners sharply enough. Now, it's a design problem, and I don't know how you'd overcome it unless we have a clever electronic switching system where we could switch electronically between mobility mode and motorcycle mode to turn the front wheel. I don't know. I mean, comments below, please, if you can come up with a clever system of making it turn corners.
That answered all those questions, and if you've got any more questions or you'd like to see any different views or any different technical stuff about the bike, then put them in the comments, and over the next few weeks we'll answer your questions. And this isn't the only electrical bike we own. There's obviously the Tron bike behind me that is also electrical now. It started out life with a ZZR 600 engine in it, but it's now been converted to electric. So we had part 1 of that process last week in episode 3, and we're now going to show you getting the engine in and seeing how it worked.
This was the old Tron bike, or our retro Tron bike. It was a 600cc 120 brake horsepower engine, but we've taken the engine out, number 1 because it's just too heavy, and number 2 because it was too heavy. So the engine was there, we've taken it all out, we replaced it with an electric motor which is now sitting here kind of clamped in at the moment. You can see it's driving through a main sprocket through onto the back wheel, and obviously when the motor power is applied to the motor, the back wheel will go around. This big area here unfortunately will be full of batteries, so we'll run it either at 36 volts or 48 volts, I don't know yet. It's an old wheelchair motor, but it's been tweaked. So it should give us a good speed actually, it should be quite good. Now, all these brackets are going to be welded in a minute, so this one is going to fit here, but this is going to be unusual because that will be welded in, but then here is going to have to be a tensioning system, because we're going to need to tension this chain, because you can see at the moment it's too slack. So what I'm going to do, weld that on there and then have an adjuster here, and it will pull this bar basically backwards and forwards, which will allow us to tension the chain. And then when we put power on it, it should go. That's simple really. It's sunny. It's very sunny, makes a change. Motor's in, bolted and welded in. We're now going to have a test and see if the back wheel goes round. So I'm going to put some power onto it. So chain, good tension for electric motor. So at the moment this is a bit crude, it's just sticking 2 wires in the battery, but let's see if it goes round. 3, 2, 1.
What if you put some weight on it though? It ain't going to go at all.
And then we reverse that and it goes the other way.
Hold on, let me just look at the reversing.
All I did is turn the wires round.
Okay,
so
yeah.
Literally,
You just swap the current.
I just swap the current. And all the speed controller does, see, I swapped.
Yeah. Goes the other way.
Now this is a tiny, tiny little motorcycle battery. They will be, that's only 12 volts. We'll be running on 36 or 48 volts. And batteries much bigger than that. So we'll have a lot more power.
So we'll be able to move when someone's got the weight on it.
Oh, this will move. Yeah.
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 Move no problem.
Yeah.
So that's successfully tensioned.
Yeah, done.
Wow. Okay. Good to go. Shall I have a go then?
Yeah. I mean, at the moment it's all.
Let's see what the weight is. it still feels heavy to me, but you're telling me it isn't. You're telling me
Well,
I'm pushing against the engine.
You're pushing against the engine. Now, obviously, at the moment, that's just a mock-up battery, just to give you an idea of the weight and the height of the weight. Now, we could put the battery much lower, but I'm not sure we need to. It's actually easy to manoeuvre.
How much heavier will it feel if we put it lower?
It'll just have a lower centre of gravity.
Does it make a big difference, slinging it? Like if you could hang it from under this bar rather than putting it on it?
Yeah, you wouldn't feel the weight as much. You wouldn't feel the upper weight.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I want to ride it now. Welcome back. And as you can see, we've got a little bit of the bodywork back on the Tron bike. But underneath, it's far from finished. We've got a lot of work to do, and we'll let you know how we get on with that over the next few weeks. So, I'm sitting here on the Batbike, and I have to say, the Batbike is one of the hardest bikes to get on and one of the most uncomfortable to sit on for any length of time. Jesus. I can't get my leg on. How on earth anyone ever thought this was a good idea, I do not know. Also, I think my mic's being crushed, and that's not all that's being crushed. And get into it in a hurry. I'm scared of taking my feet off the ground. I've never done this before. Where does my foot go? Oh my God. Please don't leave. What we mostly get asked about the Batbike is, what are these tyres made out of? Shh, they're not real tyres. They're actually made out of foam. And of course a bit of trusty glue gun. You know all about that from last week. So the Batbike's probably one of our oldest props, one of my most favourite, but also the most uncomfortable. Now we're going to go on to a little bit about some animatronics, and particularly in our owls. So let's talk about owls. The owl project really interests me because they're made from materials that you'll find in most homes, and even a numpty like me could make one. So this is Bubo. He's a tribute to one of the greatest special effects artists ever, Ray Harryhausen, and he comes from the film The Clash of the Titans. Now, the model for the film was about this big, but Master Maker, when he made Bubo, he made him twice as big, so that when we take him to Comic-Cons, people can interact with him. And we've been taking him to Comic-Cons for a very long time. He's one of the oldest props we own. What do you think he's made out of? People are always amazed. Cardboard. It's a much maligned, brilliant building material. And to be honest, once you've finished your cornflakes, you can use the packet to build an owl. Pretty much free. So obviously Bubo was a one-off model, and he was made with just cutting out the scales, glued together, cardboard structure inside, and that was that, painted up, and he was extremely popular. People quite often asked us, oh, do you sell those owls? So last year we made a limited edition of 10 owls. For the 10 owls, it would have taken ages to cut everything out by hand. So we actually cut a lot of the pieces cardboard out using our laser cutter. I know every home doesn't have one, but it's a fabulous machine. So we'll tell you a bit more about that in one of our mid-week minis. So anyway, with the 10 owls, we started with the legs, just a bent bit of metal, made up two, wrapped around bits of cardboard, all glued together, some circles for the middle of the body and the head, and straps of card to make the structure. And then we used 502 wood glue, diluted to 50%, and kitchen towel. Put strips of them all over, completely covered them. It took about 24 hours to dry, but it gave a lot of extra strength. And also it gave you the texture to key into when you're using the paint. Paint. We like these acrylics. Really, there's no substitute with a project like this when the detail is all about the colour and the texture to having a very good quality paint. So that was the paint we used. What else have we got to tell you? Eyes. For the eyes, we used a very, very rare material. Milk bottle cartons. With the 10, we cut them out on the laser cutter to get the circles perfect. But that was a really good find and really useful material. So then the next phase was actually putting in all the electronics, and I'm going to hand you over to Master Maker so he can tell you all about that.
Okay, yeah, so basically it's all right making things out of crunchy nut cornflakes boxes and cardboard and glue. They look great, but you've got to bring them to life, and it's the movement that brings them to life. And the way we do it is really, really, really simple. In fact, you won't believe how simple this is going to be. So I'm going to show you briefly the tech that we use to bring our creatures, like the owls and like this little fella here, to life. This is the Pololu Maestro board. Now, this particular board has slots for 12 servos, or connectors for 12 servos, which you can see along there. Got our USB connector which connects to the computer, which is here, and then we've got some other kind of connectors for power and other bits and pieces. So what we're going to do now is we're going to connect it up. So first thing we're going to connect is our servo. So this is our micro servo here, and we're going to connect it up to the board. Now when we connect it, I'm going to connect it onto terminal 0. They're all numbered, so we go 0 all the way down to 11, and obviously that gives us then 12 inputs. You notice the brown wire on the servos to the outside, and the red is to the middle. That's kind of the earth is down the outside and the power is in the middle. So even if you plugged it the wrong way round, you won't damage it. Now what we're going to plug in next is going to be the computer. We've got our little micro USB. Plug it in, and you can see as soon as we do that, the board, little lights start flashing on the board to tell us that we've got power. Now, that won't provide enough power to operate the servo. Well, perhaps it would operate one, but it wouldn't operate multiple servos. So we need to use an external power supply. So again, we're going to plug that in, and I'm going to plug it into just a spare one of the servo ports. Doesn't matter which. Earth on the outside. Plug it in, and as soon as I plug it in, you notice the servo is going to move. Now the reason it's going to move is because I've got a little program that's already running on here. And to show you that it's running on the board, I'm actually going to disconnect the USB from the computer, and you will see that it will run completely autonomously. So it's running the code that's on there, it's running it to move that servo. We now have everything connected up. Computer connected to board, servo connected to board through port 0, and the battery connected to the board to power the servo. We have opened the program. Now the program is completely free of charge to download from Pololu's website. You notice here 0 to 11. These represent the actual servo ports, so we can obviously plug in 12 servos. Our servo is plugged into port 0. When I move this slider, you will notice that the servo moves proportionately to the movement of the slider. So move the slider around, the servo moves around. And if we connect other servos to these ports, we can move those sliders, which will move those other servos. Now let's program something. So let's start the servo off in the central position there. You can start it anywhere you want, but let's just start it there. We're then going to click Save Frame. And you notice now it's gone to Save Frame 1. It saved the first frame. Let's move the position of the servo to there. I'm going to Save Frame again. Let's move it over to there. So I'm just randomly moving the servo round. And each time I move it around, I just click Save Frame. Now that'll do, we've done 5 of those. We can now go to this tab, Sequence, and you can see it's saved those frames. Now we can actually change the duration of the pauses between frames. So instead of being kind of a robotic movement, we could change it, make it much more fluid, much more dynamic. If I press Play Sequence, and let's watch the servo, we'll see what happens. There we go, I'll do that again. And I'll pop that into a loop, makes it easier to see. And it will just loop that little sequence. And like I said, we could change the timings, make it a little bit more interesting, a little bit less robotic. So we'll stop that. Now, if we want to basically send this to the board, and obviously we can go back and we can add more. So I could do that again, save another frame, do that again, save another frame. You notice we can change the speed and the acceleration of the servo, how quickly it gets to certain points. See, look, I've added the extras. Play the sequence, it will now play those ones. It's very, very easy to use. So I'm going to stop that. I'm now going to send it to the board. I'm simply going to copy sequence to script. And what will happen, ignore that, what will happen is it will write that sequence into a script. And when I click apply, it will send that to the board. You can see it's running now. And if I disconnect the computer here, that sequence will run completely on its own. It's been sent to the board and it's coded onto the board. And of course we can go back in and we can change this script at any time we want. We could change the sequence at any time we want. We can combine multiple sequences together. It's very, very versatile. Also, we don't just have to have servos plugged into here. We could actually have switches plugged into here. We could have sensors plugged into here. So it's a great little board. One really amazing thing about this board, see, I'll go through, I plug the computer back in, I can stop the script and go back in, I can change the sequence, and I can alter things again. The beautiful thing about this board is it uses hardly any power at all. Now, you can power servos off the board, but I wouldn't recommend it. I recommend using a separate power supply to power your servos. Your board, once it's unplugged, will run off this power supply, but because it only uses a tiny amount of power, that's not an issue. So there we have it. Very simple way if you want to program an animatronic model or even an owl.
There's nothing subtle about the Moto T. 600cc, 125 brake horsepower. This one's a monster. There's no wimpy electric motors here, apart from that one, of course. So this was inspired by the Terminator films. And we also used H.R. Geiger's visuals a little bit here in the sort of sinuous flow of the machine. As such, it's a bit of a sister project to our 95 Spider Batmobile. And that's that for our bikes. So we're going to go back to the workshop now.
We haven't quite finished with all our bikes. Now, yeah, we've got all the sort of fancy Tron bike and the Akira and the Moto T and the Batbike. But what do you think this beauty might become? Now, we've been asked for many, many years to build the Judge Dredd bike. And this is the beginning of the Dredd bike. Now, I know it might look like a 400cc moped. That's how it starts life, but that's not how it's going to end its life. My problem is which Dredd bike. I could go for the Stallone bike, I could go for the early comic book bike. We're definitely not going to go for the latest Dredd film, the Suzuki. I don't like that one. We're really a bit traditional here. I want to go old school. So comments below, please. What do you think? Which Dredd bike do you think I should actually turn this into? Because this is a project that you are going to want to follow.
Get your hands up.